We learned this Sicha before. We've learned this talk before from the Rebbe, but let me let Aaron in. But we're going to learn it again. It's from Chai Elul, Tafshin Yud, from 1950. Between when the Rebbe accepted his leadership, the passing of Friedrich Rebbe and his accepting official leadership in Tafshin Yud Aleph on the 10th of Shvat. So the Rebbe says like this: the Rebbe Fabring tonight saying Motzei Chayel. Oidis Chayel, with regard to Chayel, what is the 18th of Elul? Kosiv Kvoik Dushas Marachami Admer. My father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, writes, Shuyoim Ha'ilede Shel Meirenu Baal Shem Tov V'Admer Azaken. It is the day of the birthday of our teacher, the Baal Shem Tov, and the Alter Rebbe. V'Apia Yiduim, what's known, Shuyoim Ha'ilodasai Shel Adai Mazali Gavar, that on the day of the birth of a person, his and her mazel is very strong. We know birthday is a time a person's mazel is very strong. And there's a source for this, that a person's birthday is an auspicious day for their mazel. As the Rebbe says, there's a Yerushalmi for that. He doesn't quote over here the Yerushalmi. He gives us a reference in footnote number 2. So the Rebbe says, moving is understood. So when it comes Chayel, and this is the birthday of both the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, so it's a day that there's Hagbaras HaKoiches, that their strengths, and we're talking about the strengths of great giants here, becomes even stronger on the day of their birthday. With regard to what are the ideas of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, my father, the previous Rebbe, explained, the Baal Shem Tov, Solal Derech L'chol Echad Ve'echad Misrael. The Baal Shem Tov paved out, Solal is like pathed out the path for every single Jew. Afilu Pashat Shebepshutim, even a simple or the most simple person, Sheyochel Avdas Hashem Yisbarach, that anyone and everyone can serve Hashem. So he made a path. Without a path, you can't move. So he created a path for every single individual, he or she, to be able to serve Hashem, no matter who they are. The Admor Hazakin, and what did the Alter Rebbe add to that? If the path was already made or paved out, Hera, he showed how every individual of the Jewish people, even the most simple, how could you do it? It means that the ability to do it was paved out by the Baal Shem Tov. But to show a person how do you walk down that path, that was shown by the Alter Rebbe. And another place it says, Muva Haloshin, there's the expression that says, Baal Shem Tov Hemet Sulam, he put up the ladder. Shakol Gamanoshim Shutim Yochel Alei Sulav, that anyone, now that the ladder has been placed, can rise on the ladder that the Baal Shem Tov put up. And in other places, the Rebbe says, this is not just any ladder. This is the same ladder in the dream of Yaakov Avinu on his way into Lavan, which starts really the avoda of the Bnei Yisrael, is when Yaakov went to Lavan. But Admar Azaken Hera Eichlalis B'Sulam. So the Baal Shem Tov put the ladder back up and said, anyone could climb, but how do you climb a ladder? The Alter Rebbe showed us how to climb the ladder. Although in the talks of my father-in-law, meaning the previous Rebbe, it didn't exactly say, what is this path? What is this ladder? We can understand it from other writings and sayings of my father-in-law, my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, that he says, Shinyani Shabal Shem Tov Hu Avas Hashem, Avas HaTorah, V'Avas Yisrael. You want to know what is the path that was paved out? What is the ladder that was placed up, was erected up by the Baal Shem Tov? It's what we know. What was the Baal Shem Tov's ideas? What was his fundamental principles? That there has to be Avas Hashem, love of God, Avas HaTorah, love of Torah, V'Avas Yisrael, love of your fellow Jew. The Rebbe says sometimes the order is not first Avas Hashem, love of God, but Avas Yisrael, first comes love of your fellow Jew. Avas HaTorah, love of the Torah, and then you'll have Avas Hashem. Meaning Milmata Lamaila or Milmaila Lamata or Milmata Lamaila. Depends how you look at it. First, starting from below up, is you start with your fellow person, and that would lead to be able to have love of Torah, and that would lead to reaching all the way to Avas Hashem. or you start with Avos Hashem and you used to go down to Avos Torah and down to Avos Yisrael. Gimel Avos Elu, these three loves. And again, when the Rebbe accepted his leadership 6 months later, the Rebbe said, this is my statement. Avos Hashem, Avos Torah, and Avos Yisrael are all one. Like Gimel Avos Elu, these three loves, Avos Yisrael, Avos Torah, Avos Hashem, love of your fellow Jew, love of Torah, love of Hashem, Keshur Zeh B'Zeh Ad Shekulam Chad, are not just three separate loves, but they're connected to each other until they become a single love. U'B'Lashon HaMishnah, as the Mishnah says, Kol Shiruach Habris Noichei Imanu Ruach HaMakom Noichei Imanu. The Torah says, how do we know that there's a connection to Avos Yisrael and Avos Hashem? Because the Mishnah tells us in Avos that whoever is pleasant to people, people find you pleasant, God finds you pleasant. So we see that God's relationship with people are connected to people's relationship with each other. And the Mishnah continues, and if you're a person who people don't find you pleasant, God doesn't possibly find you pleasant. Well, the Rebbe says, and again, what is the terminology used to describe people in this statement, called brius, shiruch brius neicha, ruach hamakim neicha, is we call people brios, creations. And this is described, this idea of calling people a bria, meaning a creation as a description of a person. You could call a person an Adam, a man. You could call a person a Jew. Why does it say called brios, just a creation? So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, Perek Lamed Beis, Perek Lev, the statement that it's a tribute to Aaron HaKohen, that it says by Hillel. Hillel said that he loved every creation and he brought them close to Torah. Even if a person on their own is distant from the Torah of Hashem, in the service of Hashem. So therefore, if they have no avoda and they have no closeness to Hashem, there's no quality that you could describe them by. The only quality you could attribute to them is that they're a creation of Hashem. There's nothing unique or special about them because they haven't worked on themselves. They haven't engaged and spent time in Avodas Hashem. So what do you have to say about yourself? I'm a Bria, I'm a creation of God. I'm a super, as it says in the Gemara. Rabbi Lazar passed the person. The story shows literally that the person was ugly. Obviously, he wasn't just physically ugly. So Rabbi Lazar said, look how ugly this person is. And the person answered Rabbi Lazar, why are you telling me? Tell the person who made me. Tell the craftsman who made me. Who's the craftsman who made me? Hashem. You have a taina, you have a complaint about my ugliness. Take it up with the Uman. Take it up with the master, with the creator, the person who formed me. Nevertheless, although a person could only be a brias, so a person's only quality is that they're a brias. Like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, you have to pull them with the great loves, the great ropes of love. You don't say, well, this person is spiritually ugly, and this person is not doing anything about avoda. Why am I even paying attention to him? The Alter Rebbe writes or heard. So the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, Perek Lamed Beis, that nevertheless, that you're Avos Yisrael, even to the brias, even if the only quality is that they're a creation of Hashem, you take them with great ropes and bring them closer to Avos, to the avodah of Torah and avodas Hashem and service of God. So too in our situation. Even if a person's just the only quality is that they are a creation of Hashem. Nevertheless, the Torah says, the Mishnah says, that if people find you pleasant, even the simple people that are only called a bria, then God finds you pleasant. And whoever a simple person, there's a dagesh here the Rebbe is saying, it's an amazing dagesh. A person may say, what's the sign? How do I know about this Mishnah? If Hashem likes me, if Hashem finds me pleasant, am I accepted by the aristocrats? With the people who sit in the Mizrach Vant like me? Am I pleasant to the president of the synagogue, to the gabbai of the synagogue? No, the Mishnah doesn't say that. The Mishnah says fakert, the brias. What do the simple folk think of you? What is the person that their only identity is that a bria? Does that person find you pleasant, or is that person the person you ignore? and doesn't even know you exist, or who thinks that you don't know that he exists or she exists. So the Mishnah says, the brias, that's the indication, that's the sign of Ruach HaMakom Nachimenu. How do we know if God finds you pleasant, if the simple people find you pleasant? And if the simple people don't find you pleasant, God doesn't find you pleasant. From here we see, if a person is lacking in their love of their fellow Jew, meaning the simple folk, the brias don't find you pleasant, this is a sign. You are lacking in your Avos HaTorah and Avos Hashem. Why? Because like the Rebbe said, that the Avos HaTorah, Avos Hashem, and Avos Yisrael are one. And if one of them are lacking, and the sign that they're lacking is that the simple focus don't find you pleasant, so then it's a sign that you're lacking in your true love of Torah and your true love of Hashem. God doesn't find you pleasant. The Rebbe says to be more specific. Avos Hashem levadai. What does it mean to just love Hashem? I love Hashem. That's where I concentrate. That's where I put my efforts in. The Rebbe says it straight out. If you're only focusing on your own personal love for God, it's gonna bring you to his baidus. His baidus means isolation, because you're working on yourself, and especially if you hold yourself on a high madrega, you don't have time and focus for someone else. It's specifically from simple people. So too, if you throw yourself only into Torah, into your love for Torah, you're going to find yourself very pleasant to yourself. You're going to be very special to yourself. Look how much Torah I know. You're not Bnei Israel. You're going to cut yourself off from other people. Why? Because now, how could you spend time with other people? No one's as pleasant as you, or no one even knows how pleasant you are. Therefore, the Rebbe says you can't just have Avos Hashem and Avos Torah, even if they're genuine Ava, even if it's a genuine love for God, a genuine love for Torah. A person must have Avos Yisrael. The Rebbe says more than that. And the Rebbe says it's not just that you need to have all three, but it's a statement. If you do not have Avos Yisrael, it means you do not have love for God, you do not have proper love for Torah. Avos Yisrael nisenes chizuk. When a person loves your fellow Jew, it strengthens. Avos Torah, with your love in Torah, and it affects Avos Hashem tiamitis, that your love of God should be real. Avos Hashem v'Avos Torah poilim mevim de Avos Yisrael. And if you truly loved Torah and God, automatically you would love another person. So it goes both ways. If you love another person, it strengthens your love in God and Torah. And when you love God and Torah, automatically you're going to love your fellow person, actually, not just in concept. And because this was the motto, and this is what the Baal Shem Tov lived by in his whole life, both before he revealed himself and after he revealed himself. So the Rebbe says a person draws energy to strengthen their avodah in the three loves, specifically Avos Yisrael, on Chai El, the 18th of El. Afilu in b'meshech hashana kula. The Rebbe said, let's say that throughout the regular year, hayachaser begimel avos, you were not perfect in your three loves. V'shaychaysen zelazeh, and their connection to each other, the love's connection to each other, the love of God, love of Torah, and love of your fellow Jew. Harvevoy Chayel comes Chayel. Yom HaYiledesh Amareno Baal Shem Tov, on the day of the great birthday of the Baal Shem Tov and Admar HaZaken of the Alter Rebbe. That their strengths become stronger, like everyone's strengths become stronger on their birthday. And what is the strength of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe? Avos Hashem, Avos Torah, and Avos Yisrael. Therefore, you have strength as being a chassid and connected to these tzaddikim, and especially that they're Nasi Hadar, they're the Nasi of the generation. In the Gimel Avos v'Shaychusin Zelzeh, that you should have strength in the three loves of Avos Torah, Avos Hashem, and Avos Yisrael, and their connection to each other. Or Pashas, the Rebbe says, simply said, Shenasis ha'akora b'moyach, and Chai El. The Rebbe says, how do we put this simple? Not talking concept. How do we simplify this idea? Is that you have an ha'akora b'moyach, you have a comprehension in your mind, v'ahergesh v'lev, and a feeling in your heart, she efsher lechalik, that is impossible to separate, to divide, ulahafrit, to separate. Ben gimel avos, between these three loves, again, Avos Yisrael, Avos Torah, and Avos Hashem. Kivan shekulim chad, because they're one. Kishem Yisrael, just like the Jewish people. Vayrais in the Torah v'kuchabrichon Hashem kol echad. That was the first talk that Rebbe opened with on Chai El in 1950. The Rebbe continues. In Yanam Shal Yud Beis Hayamim. Now we know that there's 12 days. Hey, Danny, there's 12 days between Chai El and Rosh Hashanah. So the Rebbe says, in Yanam Shal Yud Beis Hayamim, Chai El ad Rosh Hashanah. With regard to the 12 days that we have, from the 18th of El until Rosh Hashanah, Mevar Kvar Kedush Maracham Yadmer. My father-in-law told us, how does a person spend these 12 days? Like we spoke in the Torah, in the Parsha class last night, that a person has to spend these 12 days to do a cheshbon and nefesh, to analyze, self-analyzation of how you've done in the past 12 months, meaning each day, yom l'chodesh, yom l'chodesh. From the 18 days remaining to Rosh Hashanah, take one day and apply it to the first month, the second month, the third month, and analyze, cheshbon and nefesh, make an analyzation, how you performed, how did you live up to the resolutions you made, and how did you perform actually? Hechel michayel atzmai. Chayel is the first of the 12 days. We have 29 days of El. Shuayim the cheshbon hanefesh al chodesh tishrei shavar. On the Chayel is the time we make in a calculation and evaluation. How did we perform last year Tishrei? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the 10 days of Tshuva, Sukkot, the 4 days between Sukkot, the Chol Hamoed, Shana Rabbah, Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres, Shabbos Bereshis. All that we have to make a cheshbon nefesh on the 18th of El. So the Rebbe says that Shabai Hayu Rabbim Nimtzayim Kam B'Yachidim Kvaytus Marcham Yadmer. And the Rebbe says that last year, which is 19 Tavshin Tes, which was the end of 1949. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe was still alive, and the Rebbe says most of us here had the opportunity and the schus to spend Yom Tov with the Rebbe. With the Rebbe as he was alive in this world. And here the Rebbe says an amazing idea. The Rebbe says because the Friedrich Rebbe himself says that on the 18th of El is a day a person has to make an evaluation on the month of Tishrei. And the month of Tishrei, we know the power of the month of Tishrei, a month of brachas, of blessings. So the Rebbe says, surely, my father-in-law, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe himself, is making a calculation. How did he do in the month of Tishrei? So the Rebbe explains. Vagdama. Sheyeshnam keila, there are those shepoichadim, that they're scared. There's a statement that talks about the dead. It says the dead are free. So the Rebbe is attributing that statement that the Friedrich Rebbe would be free from any obligation he took. The obligations I took was when I was alive. Once I passed on to the next world, I'm free of any of my obligations. Aval Emes, the Rebbe says, no, it's not true. That statement of that the dead are free doesn't apply to everyone. As it's brought down in the Sefer Chassidim, it's not a Sefer written by what we call contemporary Chassidim from the Baal Shem Tov. It was written many years ago. That the righteous, they're still alive, i.e., they still have the obligations they had. They never got rid of their obligations because they don't pass away. They're not like regular what you'd call dead people. That they no longer have obligations and commandments when they pass on. After they pass on, they have all their obligations that they had to their communities and to the Chassidim and to Klal Yisrael as they had before. And based on this, and the Rebbe said this many times in the year of this Talkus, in the year of the passing of the Rebbe, of Friedrich Rebbe, a story that's brought down in Talmud. Right? It's a story not brought down in Talmud. It's not like a Chassidish Amaisa. Someone could say, oh, that's the Chassidim. This is a story brought down in the Talmud. After the passing of the Rebbe, Rabbeinu HaKadosh is referring to Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah. So we're talking about 2,000 years ago. The Rebbe would come, the Gemara says, he would come every Friday night after his passing. He would come to his own house, his wife and children, and he would make Kiddush for the family, like he did when he was alive. And the Sefer Chassidim uses this as a proof that the tzaddikim are still alive even after they pass on. And that means they buried Rebbe. He passed away on a Friday. They buried him, and all the things that happened that didn't change. But he would come back, and he would make kiddush every Friday night. And in Sefer Chassidim it says there isn't just that he made kiddush, so to say, as in this person who came back from the dead, and therefore he made kiddush and everyone made kiddush afterwards. They were able to listen to his kiddush, and they didn't have to make their own kiddush because Rebbe made kiddush for them, even though he wasn't in this world. He already passed on. And the proof we see from here is that even the dead who are tzaddikim still have obligations. Is that Rebbe had an obligation to make kiddush? Had he not had an obligation to make kiddush, the people who listened to his kiddush would have to make their own kiddush. But the fact that it says that he made their own kiddush, that they were yoytza, the kiddush that he made was good enough for them to be able to have fulfilled their obligation of making kiddush. Why? Kivin Rabbeinu HaKadosh. When it's referring to the holy Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rebbe, he's not like your regular people, a person who passes away. That has no obligations to mitzvahs, because had he been freed of mitzvahs, he wouldn't be able to make kiddush for everyone. The Eisha love, he of the kiddush hayom, he also has the obligation. And all the other obligations.
Are they saying he came back physically or like in a vision? He drank the kiddush wine or what?
He drank the kiddush wine and he came back physically. We find this also in another story, a story brought down by, I forget the author of the Sefer, talking from many, many years ago in Hebron, maybe 1,000 years ago in Hebron, that they were short a minyan on Yom Kippur, and in Avram Avinu Shul, anyone knows Avram Avinu Shul in Hebron, it's called because of this story. They didn't have a minyan on Hebron. It was many, many years ago talking about. And someone showed up and spent the whole Yom Kippur with them. And after he left, he came in a dream to the Rav, or wherever, the person in charge of the shul. And he told him that he's Avram Avinu. And nevertheless, he came and he was part of the minyan. He made up 10. Gama Sipur. Oh, here we go. This is right. This is exactly what I was saying. Gama Sipur, Shemuver b'Sefer b'Emek Melech. It's a sefer called Emek Melech. That's the source of the story I just told you. Shetzirfur is Avram Avinu kasiri the minyan. That Avram Avinu was a 10th of the minyan. Again, Avram wouldn't be able to be part of the minyan if he wasn't alive. If he was just a zombie, just a ruach, of a spirit, he wouldn't make up 10. He technically needed 10 people. That's the halacha. Nevertheless, he came from the afterworld, and he spent Yom Kippur with the people in Hebron, and he made up the minyan. They were yaitz of the minyan. I mean, they weren't here to make a game. He needed 10 people to be able to read Kriya and all the things they have to do with the minyan. They say Kaddish. So what's the explanation? When it comes to an inclusive soul, not your regular person. And what's the sign of an inclusive soul? That everything about them, all their life, was about it was all about giving themselves over to their students and to those who are connected to them, kusher to them. Over Klal Yisrael and general Klal Yisrael. Is ein shum tzivat studies shetuchel afridim minyanim meikri. And the Rebbe says if that's their main point, there's no side thing. What is the Rebbe referring to? A side thing like passing away? That's going to stop this connection. That means that tzaddikim don't leave and are not separate from their flock. Tzayin marisa means their flock. They're still obligated. And they still have their biblical obligations and Torah mitzvahs because they're part of their communities. And they have an obligation to help and to make easy and all the things that their chassidim need from them. They could even make kiddush. There's no such thing as free. The Rebbe is making a point here. They have their same obligations. On the contrary, but Yesser says even more so. What does it mean they have more obligations now? Because they don't even have an excuse to say that there's limitations of a body. Even the tzaddik has limitations of a body. But once they leave their body, and the moment when they left their body, unless they come back in physical body, like Charles said, so then they have more access, more abilities. They can perform better. So therefore they have to perform better. Like Tanya says that even if a tzaddik serves Hashem with great love and pleasure, he's still a human that loves God. When you no longer are limited to the body, you have deeper powers and more options. Moving from here, the Rebbe says it's understood. And the Rebbe means it's not just Tishrei of Tavshin Tes. We have Tavshin Yud, and Yud Aleph, and Beis, and Gimel, and Dalid, Pei Dalid. That the Rebbe of their community, of the Nasi of the Dar, has to make a cheshbon and nefesh, has to make an evaluation of the obligations he made to Chassidim in the month of Tishrei. Shagam la'achir yistalkus, even after the passing. Hari mechuyev b'zeh. The Rebbe is still obligated. And therefore he still does what he has to do. Those who question if you got a bracha from the Rebbe, maybe it's not applicable anymore. Like it was a year ago, 2, 3 years ago, 30 years ago. Once he becomes a Rebbe and gives himself over to his students, Muksharav, and those who are connected to him. And the job of the Rebbe is to help everything that they need, and those obligations are still here today. The Rebbe says like this. The Rebbe continues. What is the valuation that the previous Lubavitch Rebbe makes on Tishrei of last year? It's not just in inspiring or in Torah, but in any blessings he gave in the month of Tishrei. The Rebbe says now that the previous Rebbe, means his father-in-law, told him once, the Friedrich Rebbe says, I never went bankrupt. Chas v'shalom, God forbid. And he was trustworthy, and you could rely on him to pay all his obligations. If he never went bankrupt, he's not going about to go bankrupt now and not fill his obligations of the blessings he gave people. The Rebbe is like this. As far as the Rebbe is concerned, because he gave a bracha, not just a bracha, he gave a promise. For sure he could fulfill it. The Rebbe wouldn't promise something he couldn't do. But there's a condition on the Chassid side, or the Chassidah, that he's kashrus al Rebbe. You have to be connected to the Rebbe to be a receptacle to the bracha. And you have to have the belief that even now, after the passing of the Rebbe, he can fulfill, and he will fulfill his blessings and obligations to Chassidim. The Friedrich Rebbe says what he wants. The Rebbe says the previous Rebbe spoke once. What does it mean to have foreign thoughts while one davens? Shazel Kamashal says, what's the idea of having a foreign thought when you daven? It's an example of a person. You come and you knock on the door of the king. And the king opens the door to you. You walk away. Instead of going forward in the conversation or walking in. It says that a person should first praise Hashem and then pray. What does it mean to say praises to the king? That's like knocking on the door of the king. When a person prays, he opens the door. So it's an auspicious time. The king opens the door. But when you're thinking foreign thoughts, what's foreign thoughts? Foreign thoughts means non-tefillah related thoughts. During davening, you're walking away when the king just opened the door for you. What does this mean to us? We went to the mikvah. And we all gathered now at this Fabrengen that we're sitting here to now on Zoom. And this is what the Rebbe wants, and on YouTube. Not only that, and we're all within the 4 walls of the Rebbe's shul. We're knocking on the door of the Rebbe now. Therefore, don't knock on the door and get up and walk away. On the contrary, take advantage of the situation. He's damnazu of this opportunity. Reconnect or retie your iskashus to the Rebbe, your connection to the Rebbe. And how does one become a makusher? How does one become connected to the Rebbe? Through studying his Torah, vitzir panav, and imagining his face, looking at a picture or a video, etc. Call Elu Rebbe, whoever's seen the Rebbe physically when he was alive, yitzar la'atzim asur panav. you could close your eyes and imagine the times you saw the Rebbe. This is, again, the Rebbe has a source for this. The Gemara says, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, again, Rebbe, who was he was the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, but he also lived. He was around the giants of his time. Rabbi Akiva was a little older than him, but he had Reb Meir. These were people, the great scholars, the students of Rabbi Akiva were all the elderly scholars of the times of Rebbe. So it says that Rabbeinu HaKadosh Amar, Rabbeinu HaKadosh said, he takes it was great effect that he had, that Rebbe was able to see it. And that doesn't mean, because obviously it seems like he saw Reb Meir more than once, but he says at a certain time he was able to see Reb Meir from the back. Had he seen him from the front, it would be much greater. And it says that another thing about Reb Meir, that someone once in the Galil is north of Israel, one of the elders of Galil were once holding Reb Meir's staff, obviously I'm assuming after he passed away, and the staff itself gave him gave him wisdom and understanding. So what do we see from here? That you have to be makasher to the Torah of the Rebbe. And you could do it also through the physical things, not just through this Torah, but also through looking at the image of a Rebbe. Like Rebbe said, that he just from seeing the back of Reb Meir, what it affected him, or the person who held the staff of Reb Meir, how it gave him das. Again, these are Gemaras. Rebbe. And when a person has connection to the Rebbe, and that's going to be the kli, the vessel that all the blessings of the Rebbe are going to be fulfilled for you, and everything that you need in Gashmis and physical and material ruchnis. The Rebbe continues. We know that one of the ideas of Elul is which is the name of the month of valuation. We could find the different avodas of Elul, or different avodas of our life, which we have to make an evaluation of it on Elul, in the different ways we could put the Rashi Tevis, the first letters, understand from the words Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed, we can understand the different avodas, which are the three pillars of Torah avodah, Gemilas Chasadim, Torah study, service of God, which is usually tefillah, and Gemilas Chasadim, acts of kindness. We have one is like we learned in the Maimer Rashi Tevis Ani L'Dai Dividai Dili. I'm to my beloved and my beloved's to me, which makes up Elul. What is that? An idea for tefillah, prayer. The Dodi, my beloved, is a reference to prayer, where we feel Avos Hashem. Kav Avodah, K'mam Rezal, Ezi Avodah Shebelev Zu Tefillah. What is the avoda of the lev, where the love is tefillah, is prayer. Hey Judith, welcome back. El Rashi Tevis, also El is the Rashi Tevis. Aleph Lamed Vav Lamed. Ish L'Rayeyu, each person to their friend. Umatanis Lavyanim, gifts to the poor, which is Gemilas Chasadim. So we see in Elul clearly about the avodah of Gemilas Chasadim, Shunin Tzedakah, the giving charity and acts of kindness. Elul is also the Rashi Tevis, Ina li yadai v'samti lach, which is about a pasuk that's talking about the reference of cities of refuge. Shenamar ba'ari miklat, it's a pasuk that talks about the cities of refuge. Shemunum al kavat Torah, as it's connected to Torah, as will be explained. Well, the Rebbe is now going to explain what is the connection to the city of refuge to the study of Torah. To understand the connection of Torah study to the cities of refuge is, we have to first understand what is the city of refuge. The city of refuge is what was the purpose of setting up the city of refuge? That anyone who by mistake killed someone by mistake, had a place to run away. Otherwise, the Gol Hadam, the family members of the person that you killed, even if it was by mistake, have permission and almost a mitzvah to kill you. So how do you protect yourself? You go to the city of refuge, and you have to stay there until the passing of the Kohen Gadol. If a person did it by mistake, then he has a place the God set aside all these cities of refuge that you could run to protect yourself. Bagdama, the Rebbe explains. When it comes to the world, there's a concept of being in prison, being sent to prison. When it comes to Torah, not to compare, that this is the Torah is the wisdom and understanding of the nations, to the eyes of the nations. We don't find the idea of prison in Torah. But we do find that a person sometimes gets put in a closed space. The only time a person is put into the kippah, into this closed space, is as a preparation to that's going to be continued, which is going to be death. So before the person's put in the death penalty, or sometimes the kippah itself is a way of death, is it gets locked up. But there's no imprisonment as a punishment. Just for meaning the experience of being imprisoned there's no such concept as imprisoning someone for a punishment, unless it's just to prepare for something greater, which is in greater meaning more severe, which is the death penalty. The nations of the world only have one world. This world. Where a person could live 70, 80 years. Like it says, no, our days are Shivim Shana and V'ing Gvuris, and if you live out to the Gvura, to strength, you have Shemanim Shana 80 years. Max, a person lives 120 years today. So as far as the nations are concerned, if you sin and go off the way, when you cause damage, and you cause damage to the only world that exists, because in the eyes of the nations there is only this world. So they grab this person. They put a person in prison to stop damaging the world, because it's all we have. So if this is all we have, you no longer can live among society because you're damaging the world that we have. But one second, when you put a person in prison, you're taking away from them their ability, because they're in prison to actualize their tafkid, their purpose in this world. But let's like clause in this so therefore no longer does the person have what's called reward and punishment or any purpose in this world, because he no longer has an ability to live in this world. For all practical purposes, you're locking that person up. The person is no longer human, almost, by being put in prison. So why are you doing it? Because we have no other choice. Because on behalf of the majority, we have to protect the majority, and so we're sacrificing the minority and putting that person in prison. Although this is all he has, this is the only world you have. But yet, what could you do? The world needs to exist, and you're hurting the rest of the people. Because the rule is, if you have a majority and you have a minority, then we have to care about the majority over the minority. And maybe even unfortunately, we have to sacrifice the freedom of this individual so the other people can feel safe in this world. But Torah doesn't recognize it that way. Torah is a Torah of life and Torah of kindness. It's good for heaven and good for creation. It's not possible. Torah does not accept to nullify one thing for something else. Torah doesn't even recognize to sacrifice even an individual and cause that person damage by imprisoning him, even if it's going to prevent damage for the majority. We're signaling the nigla of the Torah. The Rebbe says, what's this? How do we find this in the revealed parts of Torah? The halacha is that something that's stationary, kavua, is no matter what. For instance, if you have 10 stores, one is kosher and 10 are not, so we don't say that it's most likely came from a non-kosher store because there's 9 stores, because it's kavua. If it's an established place, it's always 50-50. There's never a majority when it comes to established places. Torah einei geremes nezek. And so the Rebbe says like this: Torah doesn't cause damage to that person. And even a punishment isn't just to punish someone because you want to punish them. If there's a punishment, it's because the punishment is to fix the sin. Therefore, Torah doesn't recognize sitting in prison. Because again, by being in prison, that person is not going to have the ability to do their tafkid, to do their mission in this world. A person is cut out exactly how many days they need to fulfill their obligation. By locking that person up, they no longer have those days to do their obligation. and that God gave a certain person a certain amount of time. Every person has been established in the upper courts. Zman mugbal, a limited time, yes. 80, 70 years, 110 years, 20 years. This is the amount of time you've been allocated to do your specific mission in this world. And every second of your life, a person has an obligation to live out and to fulfill your tafkid, your mission, and shlichus, what you've been sent to in this world. You can't take a break from your obligations to why you've been here. The Torah doesn't recognize just to lock a person up. You're preventing this person from fulfilling their obligations. Even if a person sinned and went off the way, it doesn't, that itself, just because you've sinned, doesn't rid you of your tafkid, of your mission and obligation in this world. And if you have questions, it's not your place to ask questions. As the previous Rebbe's father, the Rebbe Rashab says, we don't understand everything, what it means and in what situations we have to engage and do bimevar. We don't understand, we don't have a clarity of what exactly we have to, of how things work and how we have to do it. But we know that we have to constantly be doing something. Even if a person says, 1 second, I'm a sinner. So what? When you have an opportunity right now, you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah. You can't say, well, I just did a sin 5 minutes ago. Right now you have a mitzvah, you have to do a mitzvah. What do you mean I did a mitzvah? How can I do a mitzvah? I'm a sinner. You don't understand the birurim, how things work. It's not your place to make an evaluation. How could I have to do one mitzvah if I'm still lacking in another place of perfection? So that's the case. So why does Torah B'chlal have the death penalty? If a person has a tafkid and a person does a certain transgression, the Torah says this person has to be put to death. What about the person's tafkid? Person's job? Job in this world. So the idea of putting death penalties, we don't kill someone, so it benefits the majority. This person, like it says the story with Achain, with Yeshua tells him to do tshuva, that this is his tshuva, this is his tikkun, this is how he actualizes the fixing, is by death. It's not about now preventing him by killing him or her in the Bezdin. No longer do they have the ability to do their tafkid in this world or their mission. Once the world, the heavenly court decides that the Torah, that the law is that this person has to be put to death, so you no longer have a tafkid. There is no job for you to fulfill. Right now, your job is over. Therefore, Rebbe says you can't compare the idea of Ari Miklat, the city of refuge, as a prison. A person, even if there's people outside the city of refuge, members of the family of the person you killed, waiting and able halachically to be Goyal Hadam, to be the person who redeems the blood of the spilled, meaning the blood of the person you killed, you still have an obligation to do things in this world. We can't just lock the person in prison. Now give him the opportunity to do anything, because you're locked in prison. You go into special cities of refuge. It's called Golus, exile. Like the Sefer Chinuch writes, as an author, she starts our Golus. What is the pain of Golus? You're no longer connected to those people that you love because you're exiled. You're no longer in the place of your birth. But because in the city of refuge, it wasn't a prison. The person lived in a city and he had to have the ability to do everything he or she had to do in this city of refuge to be able to fulfill now their obligation is in a much smaller place, but it's a city of refuge. The halacha says that if it's a student and the student needs a Rebbe, The Rebbe goes to the Gullus, to the exile, to the city of refuge with the student, because the student needs to learn. You can't stop teaching the student because he or she is in a city of refuge. Even though the student is not a great student. Why? Because he's in a city of refuge. Nevertheless, we provide for him a teacher, or for her a teacher, so you can continue to study. The idea is we're going to go a little further today because I don't have a second chavrusa. To those who are only penciled in for 45 minutes, we may go a little longer. You could jump off if that's not working for you. What does it mean, a city of refuge? What does this all mean in the service of Hashem? What does it mean in your own spiritual service when you say ma'aka nefesh means you kill someone, even if it's by mistake? It's referring to a person who's sinned and went off the way. That means you're pageya, you affected your soul by doing sin. In both your godly soul and your animal soul. Your godly soul always lives. You can't separate it from God. Even when a person sins, the nefesh alikis, the godly soul is connected to Hashem. You hurt your animal soul because you gave in to the temptation and you separated the animal soul from godliness. Why is it called by mistake? Why isn't it called intentionally? We could say, because it's brought down from the rabbis. A person doesn't really do an avera consciously. Even if a person does it consciously, it's only because the spirit of stupidity, of foolishness, entered the person's mind to lead them astray to the avera, whatever the argument is, but it's a foolish argument. If not for that foolish thought that overwhelmed the person, you would never have sinned. Therefore, the Torah doesn't consider you as amazing. The Torah says the fact that you had this foolish thought that overwhelmed you, the temptation overwhelmed you, the Torah doesn't consider you amazing, an intentional sinner. Even Gentiles. If a person is a shait, if a person could claim insanity, you don't get punishment. You can't judge the person. It wasn't him or her. This is what the Gemara says. If there's a court of law that kills more than one person in 70 years, right? One person in 70 years, talking about the Beis Hamikdash, would be, 5 people in the whole time of the Beis Hamikdash. It's called a murderous court. What does it mean? Obviously, there were people that sinned in 70 years, more than one person. What does it mean that if you killed more than one person, it's a murderous court? And on top of that, Rabbi Tarfon or Rabbi Kiva added, had they been in the Sanhedrin, means they lived only after the destruction of the temple. But had they been members of the Sanhedrin at the time of the temple, no one would ever be killed, not just once in 70 years. So what does that mean? The Chorei doesn't make sense. The Torah says that if you do certain transgressions with witnesses and warning, there's the death penalty. How could the Rabbi Kiva say we would not kill them? Or the court that kills more than 70 years is a murderous court? So what is it? So what is it? So, and if a person who thinks that you can't say that God gives up, God does the rules. So the answer is because the great sages, by learning Torah from the source of Torah, the way it is above, not that they would nullify the obligations, but they were able to find some sort of merit that would relieve the person of the death penalty. Like the holy tzaddik Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev. Like Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev would always find the merit for a Jewish person. And the number one merit is it's not his or her fault. A foolish thought entered that person. The off became because a person says, well, if I had a ruach shtus, so why don't I? So I'm free. I didn't do it. No, a person has to go to city of refuge. So what is your crime? If you were overwhelmed by a foolish thought, but why did you make yourself vulnerable to that foolish thought? The Rebbe says in Yiddish, "Zugelost." You allowed yourself. You made yourself vulnerable. You allowed this foolish thought to enter you and to dictate and to control you. Therefore, we consider you not intentionally, but as if killing someone by mistake. And what is the fixing for someone who killed by mistake? You have to go to City of Refuge. The Gemara says, how do we know that Torah is a refuge for a person? Like it says, it's Betzer Bamidbar. It says Torah, because when it talks about the cities of refuge, it says one city was in Betzer in the desert, and then it says Zosa Torah. This is the Torah. Meaning to say, She'ir Miklat Kayal Torah. What is the city of refuge? Torah. So today we don't have the physical city of refuge, but what's the refuge? When a person kills, does damage to their soul, even if it's by mistake, go to Torah. Torah says, God says like this: Le'odam neiri biyadcha. You have your light in my hand, in your light. V'nercha biyadi, and your light in my hand. Means my light in your hand. Neiri biyadcha is Torah. My light in your hand, in the hand of the humans, of the Jewish people, is Torah. Like it says, Kiner mitzvah v'Torah, or the Torah is the light. V'nercha, and your light in my hand is the soul. Like it says, Ner havaya nishmas adam. The soul, the light of God is the soul of man. Im shemartes neiri, if you watch my light, which is the light of Torah, I'll watch your soul, your life. Shemizem muvan, from this is understood. Torah gives life to the person. It's not just the godly soul, but even the physical, the animal soul. Like it says, because everything comes through the godly soul. Like it says in Tanya and Kuntasachrin. When a person goes in to find refuge in Torah, the Torah gives refuge to the person. It gives life to the soul. That's the fixing of a soul. And that's why we find these words in Elul. That when a person goes and makes evaluation in the month of Elul, to call Hashanah and sees, what did I do throughout the year? And you come to the conclusion, I've lacked in the previous year, here and there. Not only things are lacking, I've done wrong. Like I did it maybe foolishly, but I still did things that are wrong. The Rebbe says, don't fall into despair and say, "Oi, I had such a bad year." Because God tells you, I've given you a place. You could run there. The Ir Miklat, you could go into the city of refuge, go study Torah. And the Rebbe continues along this line. He goes talks very strong about the Morash Torah. It's it's beautiful talk. The Rebbe continues. Just going to finish off. The Rebbe says, it's really a powerful talk. This Chayel. All the strengths that we have on Chayel, worth to read to those who can on their own, and it's in English as well. I just want to say one thing over here. Somewhere over here where the Rebbe talks about Melech Besada. Where was that? I just wanted to learn that little piece. I guess we'll just go to that. Let's just do the end. He says like this. So that that after all the calculations that we make and all the things we argue. A person may say, how great is the Rebbe and how low am I? I have no connection to a Rebbe. You don't have to fall into despair. We are in the month of Elul, which is the month of compassion. No matter what your past year has been, no matter what state you find yourself in, especially after making an evaluation, right? And when you make an evaluation, you know the truth. Yodeya, you know, Habir bin Chodesh Elul, that you know the month. What is Elul? Api Mashal Lamelech Shekoyden Bevoy Lier, like a king before he goes into the city. Yoitzim Anshi the Krasei, the people of the city go out and Kalm Pan Besada, they greet him in the field. And then it's allowed, Kol Mi Sharaitza, only a person who wants. Latis Lahakabel Panav, to go greet the king. Umakablas Kulam, and he greets everyone. Besaver Panim Yafis, with a gracious, Mari Panim Shechekas, with a radiant face. If you want to go to the palace, there's limitations. Then only a person with permission can walk in. Only those who are chosen. And people of special status. When the king's in the field, and that's the month of El. Even no matter what your situation is. The Rebbe says, Lias mechutin. You could be like a family member. Mechutin means like we've done a shidduch together. We've made a match together. When the Rebbe says, the bottom line is like this. Even if you find that you are a field person, you're not a city person, you have things that make you a person of isha sada. You're not in a place of settledness. A place of grass, which is for animals, a place where animals hang out. That means the animal soul hangs out there. Not just any place, but it's this place of Esav, Yaakov's brother, the place of the field. So nevertheless, the Rebbe comes to you, although you're in the field. And the Rebbe is not angry at you. On the fact that you made him schlep out to the field. That you took him to such a low place because he wants to go meet you. He wants to be with you. But where are you? You're out in the field with the animals. The Rebbe gives you a gracious face. Shows you a radiant face. And the idea is that it has to be simcha, because simcha is shemamtikim dinim. How do you break judgment? Is through simcha. Like the Alter Rebbe is a story about simcha. And therefore, when the Rebbe is in the field in the month of Elul, call me shiraitza, anyone who wants the hakul panav to greet him. Everyone's ready to greet him. If you don't even have to push. Given to Rebbe Atzmi, the Rebbe is ready to greet everyone. Everyone's going to have a turn. So the Rebbe says, so what do you do? What's the avoda? So here the Rebbe says an amazing thing. Don't be a fool. And you should just shout out, Abba Hatzileni, Father help me. You don't need to do great things. A person may say, what do I have to do in the field? You don't have to do amazing things. But call out with one essential call. Abba, Abba Hatzileni, Father, Father help me. Abba, Abba Rachmani, Father, Father have compassion. Surely, then we're going to have the continuation of the verse that says, Ani l'daydi am to my beloved, but alai chukasai, and to him, that's my desire. En chukasish HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what's God's true desire? El al Yisrael, the Jewish people. And shekol chukasish HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the only desire God has, he achirak lashpia toiv Yisrael, not just for the Jewish people, but to give good to the Jewish people. V'frata toiva ikri, we're talking about the main good, the gula shlema, with the complete redemption. Shebekarav, that's going to be soon. We're going to go together and with the Rebbe, Likras Mashiach, to the coming of Mashiach. Amen. So may it be. Thank you all for joining. A very powerful Farbrengen, appropriate for Chayel. I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos. Tonight, Matzi Shabbos is Shabbos Lichas, so everyone should have all the brachas, like the Rebbe says, B'tayv V'nigla, and revealed